I'm Newt Gingrich, and I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States because I believe we can return America to hope and opportunity, to full employment, to real security, to an American energy program, to a balanced budget. I worked with President Ronald Reagan in a very difficult period. We got jobs created again, Americans proud of America, and the Soviet Union disappeared. As Speaker of the House, I worked to reform welfare, to balance the budget, to control spending, to cut taxes, to create economic growth. Unemployment came down from 5.6% to under 4%. And for 4 years, we balanced the budget and paid off $405 billion in debt. We've done it before. We can do it again.
All right, that was part of the official announcement released just a short time ago by former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He is in for 2012, and he joins me live right here in studio. All right, I'm looking at the Standard & Poor's lowering their long-term outlook for the federal government's health from stable to negative. I'm looking at the IMF, their most recent forecast. China's economy will surpass that of America in real terms in 2016. We see inflation. We see real unemployment at 16% when you count the underemployed, those we don't count any longer. We got $14 trillion debt, $1.65 trillion deficits every year. I mean, real problems with entitlements. You talked about balancing the budget. How would you get America to a balanced budget, and how fast do you think a Gingrich presidency could do it?
Well, I think, first of all, it can't be just a Gingrich presidency. We need 12 more Republican seats in the Senate, and we need about 40 more Republican seats in the House. But if we had a contract in the fall of 2012, and if we had an election on core principles and we won that election, then we would have a mandate starting on the very first day with executive orders. And one of the things we're going to do is have an executive order program online during the campaign. So you'll know the first executive order, by the way, would abolish all the White House czars. And the goal would be to stop after the inaugural address and before the legislative luncheon and spend 1 hour signing pre-existing executive orders. So the speed with which you'd start to turn the ship would be that day, not a month later, not 2 months later. Second, I would want to work with Mitch McConnell and John Boehner to have a team contract that they are pledged to pass in the first 120 days.
So you want to create another contract with America?
Absolutely.
And that will be coming when?
Well, I think that would probably come around Labor Day or slightly later next year. But I want to create the concept. I mean, we know, for example, that if you really are serious about balancing the budget, you can do it. We did it. It took us 3 years. We then balanced it for 4 consecutive years. We paid off $405 billion in debt. Nobody thought we could do it when we started. But we did it.
How do you balance this budget? We've never had these numbers before.
Well,
and how are you saying that we could do it in 3 years, 5 years?
I think probably 5 years. But let me. Yeah. It depends in part on how fast you can regrow the economy. You know, here's the bizarre good news out of the bad news. We only went down from 5.6% to slightly below 4%. That's only a differential of about 1.6%. But our natural unemployment rate's around 4%. So if we went from 9%, and remember with the underemployed, it's 15%.
Because they got to get back into the system.
Yeah. So if we went back down to 4% in, say, 3 or 4 years, you would really suddenly have a dramatically different economy with a dramatically different revenue flow. You'd have fewer people in Medicaid, fewer people in unemployment, fewer people in welfare. You know, and you'd suddenly have a drop in government spending, a rise in government revenues.
How do you deal with entitlement reform, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security? We keep hearing these are the third rail of American politics. And we already saw the president actually said about Paul Ryan's plan that kids with Down syndrome and autism and old people have to, quote, fend for themselves. How do you
look,
get people to buy into?
Let me say, first of all, President Obama should be ashamed of himself. For the President of the United States, a year and a half before an election, to deliberately use dishonest scare tactics, it demeans the United States of America. He said things about Paul Ryan's budget that were falsehoods, and he said things that were deliberately divisive. He did the same thing in El Paso on immigration.
Making fun of Republicans.
And attacking, I mean, he's saying, well, I'd really like to work with you, but by the way, let me now go out and lie about you for a while.
Well, do you want to build moats with alligators?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, you just read the speeches, that might have been a nice campaign speech for a U.S. Senator from Illinois, It's a terrible speech for the President of the United States. So let me start right there. I would say to you that I have enormous faith in the American people. We undertook welfare reform. We brought in all the governors, and we had a tremendous team effort, never before done. We had the governor's staffs, people like John Engler and Tommy Thompson and Mike Leavitt, George Allen. The result was we passed a welfare reform which 2 out of 3 people went to work or went to school. Virtually every analyst today agrees people are better off today because of our welfare reform. But we had to talk to the American people. We then did something that's never been studied, but was actually amazing. In 1996, we were told that Medicare would go broke in a very short time. I personally chaired the Medicare task force, brought together the Ways and Means Committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, and did it with AARP not fighting us, with a liberal Democrat in the White House running for re-election, and we passed a major reform of Medicare with the president signing it.
And you think you can do that with Social Security? You think you can do it?
There are different problems. You deal with Social Security by, first of all, going out and holding a whole series of hearings around the country in which the only people who come are under 30 years of age. And you say to people under 30, you look at your lifetime, you look at the real numbers, you come advise us, what plan do you want? Because this is about your future. And get it away from politics, get away from interest groups, get away from Washington lobbyists.
Last question on the economy. We got to take a break. What would you do to get gas prices down? Every American.
I would reverse Obama's entire pattern of being anti-American energy. I would start by saying drill here, drill now, pay less. I would go out and shale gas. I would go out and offshore oil. I would go out and encourage other developments. I would also encourage flex fuel cars. And I would encourage blender pumps so that you'd have a choice of what you're buying at the pump. But the fact is, if we decided that we were serious about American energy and we had a government that was actually pro-energy, you would find that within 3 to 5 years, we were dramatically more productive and prices were coming down.
All right, when we come back, we're going to have more with the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He is in for 2012. Also, Michelle Malkin and Juan Williams are here with reaction to tonight's controversial poetry event at the White House, which included the rapper Common, who has used a lot of inflammatory remarks in the past. That, much more, straight ahead. And thanks for joining us tonight on Hannity as we welcome the newest Republican contender for the White House in 2012, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Foreign policy. Difference between your foreign policy, if you were president, versus President Obama.
Well, first of all, I think we should have a foreign policy.
We don't have one?
Well, I mean, you have the president who on March 3rd said Gaddafi has to go. Gaddafi's still there.
He gave up.
You have a president who has zigzagged about dealing with Iran. You just go down the list. It's a very, very discouraging mess. But there's a core difference. I think we need an American foreign policy based on American interest. When the president spoke from the National Defense University about Libya, he cited the UN and the Arab League 8 times and the U.S. Congress once. I think that's sort of the wrong cycle.
For example, a lot of people have been speculating, well, what is the bin Laden factor? In other words, that here he orders our brave Navy SEALs, successful operation. They get bin Laden. But yet we also discovered that without enhanced interrogations, Gitmo, rendition, black sites, in other words, the very policies he's opposed, we wouldn't have gotten them. No acknowledgement or tip of the hat to President Bush.
Look, here's the real problem if you're a true left-winger. Reality is not nice to you. They're now going to discover all sorts of material, and which is, for example, going to lead the American people to say, we've given $20 billion to Pakistan since 9/11, and they were housing bin Laden? I mean, does any serious person believe that bin Laden could have been in that town and the Pakistanis didn't know it? And you're going to find more and more information like that, and you're going to have more and more questions come out, because the worldview of the American left is fundamentally out of touch with the reality of the real world. And so this information is going to make the president's ability to continue to hide from reality diminish dramatically.
What about, some of the positions that I never understood? Miranda rights for enemy combatants on the battlefield. He wanted to close Gitmo, and we're now prosecuting, Eric Holder is investigating the very CIA interrogators that got the information that they were approved to get.
Eric Holder should never have been approved by the U.S. Senate. He volunteered to write papers for terrorists. He volunteered to try to help terrorists get out of jail. His record out of office between the Clinton years and today was such that it should have disqualified him from serving as Attorney General. And in fact, the U.S. House should be investigating what his beliefs are, because he is consistently doing the wrong things as it relates to Americans, and every American should be outraged that CIA officers who are risking their lives to try to save this country from attack are being attacked by their own Attorney General.
What do you think of the issues of the pictures? What do you think of the issue of the funeral? Quote, in accordance with Islamic custom. We're told on the one hand bin Laden doesn't represent a Muslim, but yet he's a radical Islamist. But he got, let's see, a funeral within 24 hours. He had his body cleaned, wrapped in a shroud, 40-minute service on a U.S. aircraft carrier, translated into Arabic. Is there a hypersensitivity with the president?
I don't know. I mean, as a historian, I look back at what we would have done with Adolf Hitler, or somehow it doesn't strike me that we would have been nearly as concerned. This man was a mortal enemy of the United States. Said so publicly, said so proudly. And I think sometimes we have to have an ability to look evil in the face and decide to do the right thing.
Would we have gotten bin Laden if the Obama policies were in place, or does he really does the credit for the intelligence really go to black sites, rendition, EITs?
Look, a lot of the credit for the intelligence goes to things that President Bush set up. But I also agree with Vice President Cheney, who said the other day, you have to give President Obama credit that when he got down to the tough decision, he had the guts to make the right decision. How much would you worry about another 9/11? How vulnerable? Do you think we've become more vulnerable? Would you view the president as timid, indecisive, weak? What are your adjectives for him on foreign policy? I helped create, with President Clinton, the Hart-Rudman Commission. We spent 3 years looking at American national security. We reported in March of 2001, before 9/11. We said the greatest threat to the United States is a weapon of mass destruction going off in an American city, probably from a terrorist group. That was in March. I will sit here today and tell you with great concern, not a day goes by that I don't worry about us being attacked, and not a day goes by that I don't worry that the attack will be a nuclear weapon or something comparable, not something like 9/11.
Last question. Who do you think is your toughest competitor in the primary?
I think the key is to reach out to the American people, offer a new generation of solutions, a new generation of approaches. And I'm going to have many good friends running, and they're people I've known a long time. I hope we're going to have a very positive campaign. But the only competitor I think about is President Obama. What
would a Newt Gingrich, Barack Obama debate look like?
I think it would be very interesting. I think the difference in our fundamental values, our fundamental belief systems, is so great that it would be one of the most educational debates, I think, in modern America.
All right. Well, you're in. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. Appreciate you being with us, and we will be talking in the days and months ahead. And coming up next, the rapper who has in the past talked about the assassination of former President George W. Bush. He took to the stage just a short time ago inside the White House. Juan Williams, Michelle Malkin, they're going to react to the controversial event. That much more straight ahead.
Who's in control is the one that's above us.